3 Lives 3 Worlds, 10 Miles of Peach Blossoms. By Tangqi Gongzi. Translated by Hamster 428. Side story. Yehua. That year, lotuses bloomed gloriously in the jade pond on heaven. The woman he ardently loved ignored his feelings and determinedly threw herself down Zuxian Tai, the barrier wall of Zhukongtian. His mother had a difficult labor. When she gave birth to him, she was in pain for all of 7 days. No other infant in the heaven palace was as burdensome as he was. By the time he wailed his first cries, golden light radiated throughout the 36 levels of heaven. 72 rainbow birds from Mt. Junji from Donghuang soared to the sky and circled around his mother's chamber, dancing for 81 days. There was a similar incident on heaven in the past. That was when his second uncle Zhangpi was born. The only difference is, circling around the lady's chamber then were only 36 rainbow birds. Tianjun was so elated, he cried tears of joy. In front of everyone in Lengxiao Palace, he bowed toward the east and said, "What immense grace! Finally the Heaven clan can welcome a crown prince." There was at last a destined crown prince after Zhangpi was exiled. Being a destined crown prince means he had to act according to Tianjun's wishes. On his shoulders were the expectation of all the past Tianjuns. When he was 9, he once stood leaning on the door of his father's Lingye palace and gazed outside. There were little fairies with peach buns on their head playing around. He was envious of them. Young children on heaven like to play and have fun. As for him, he's never played with anyone. Tianjun listened to Ling Bao Tiansen and invited the only master in the world who was well versed in both Buddhism and Taoism, Sahang Zhenren, to be his teacher. Each day from the hour of the dragon he had to sit on the jade overlay golden chair in the study and studied for all 7 hours until the end of the hour of the dog when everyone else has lighted up his lamps. Only his mother pitied him. She would make dessert and bring it to his study. He was only 9 at the time. The books in front of him were difficult to comprehend. He whined to his mother and she ended up begging Tianjun. Tianjun was fuming red. From that day on, until he ascended to divinity at age 20,000, he couldn't see his mother anymore. Once, Sahang Zhenren left to attend Buddha's lecture in the West. Nobody was there to make him study. He sneaked out to play with Taishang Lejun's water buffaloes and got caught by his father. His father caned him brutally and said, "Why are you not at all ambitious? Tianjun's heir isn't like anyone else." When your second uncle was born, there were only 36 rainbow birds which came to congratulate. Yet he was able to ascend by the time he was 30,000 years old. Think, 72 rainbow birds came all the way from Mount Junji to congratulate your birth. If you can't become a high deity before you're 30,000, wouldn't you disappoint those 72 rainbow birds? His father gave him such a short deadline only because there was still a ghost within his soul. He offered such a ridiculous reason because he couldn't forget how he could never measure up to Zhangpi in their childhood. After that incident, there came a new maidservant named Sujin. His father told him she was selected to be his playmate. Even though he was still young, he understood perfectly that there was no time for playmates with his maddening study schedule. His father was only finding him a babysitter. Had she been an ordinary maid, he of course would find a way to make her cry for mercy. He's after all the future crown prince of heaven. Even if he drove her soul all the way to hell's level of hatred, after receiving punishment from Tianjun, he'd still be his grandson, the crown prince of heaven. Unfortunately, this maidservant Sujin possessed somewhat of a background. There is a branch of the heaven lineage, which contained not more than 5,000 souls. But whether male or female, they were all masters of martial arts. Everyone were generals or soldiers of the heaven army, belonging to a special unit which answers directly to Tianjun. Sujin's father was the head of this unit. 20,000 years ago, when the demon clan uprose, Tianjun ordered an army of 100,000 to follow the god of war Moiwan to quench the demon clan. The group which Sujin's father headed was part of this army. After the war was over, only 90,000 soldiers returned to heaven. With them was a blood-stained letter from Sujin's father. It contained just a few words, black ink blemished in red blood. He asked Tianjun to look after his infant daughter, the only one left in the entire clan. Tianjun was touched by Sujin's father's sacrifice and wanted to reward their clan heftily, except there was only Sujin left in this clan. In the year of Houda 63,083, Sujin was named Princess Zaoran, and was entrusted to the care of Tianjun's eldest son, Yehua's father. Sujin was older than him by 20,000 years. According to ranks, he should call her great aunt. At first he wasn't very comfortable whenever Sujin stood by his desk. But eventually he treated her no differently from the parchments and ink brushes on the stand. By then he was already a lovely child, except he never uttered a word. As time went by, he grew from a child to a young adult. The whispers behind his back grew day by day. They said his outer appearance had an uncanny resemblance to the missing god of war master Moiwan's. Even Tianjun once watched his face and sighed, when Moiwan was in his youth, his looks were like yours. Although he has been gone for more than 30,000 years, he's not an ordinary immortal. Perhaps he was able to preserve a piece of his soul and return to be born from your mother's womb. Tianjun's words insinuated that there was a possibility he was Moiwan's reincarnation. Ridiculous. Immortals aren't recorded in the underworld's schedule book, so there's no way for them to reincarnate after death. There were people who speculated that he was the reincarnation of Moiwan. Even though reincarnation within the immortal realm was against the regulations of the 3 realms and 5 elements, a majority still compared him to Moiwan. He really couldn't stand people picking Moiwan over him behind his back. He trained even harder after becoming Sahang Genren and Yuan Shui Tianxin's disciple. When he was almost 20,000 years old, the great Buddha from the West Sky held a lecture 1 year. He attended with Sahang Genren. He discussed philosophy with the Guangwang Buddha and the past, present, future Buddha for 3 days. The 2 Buddhas' praise for him spread all over the lands. Tianjun happily said, "Zhangpi was rather intelligent back then, but he can't compare to you. I must reward you this time. What would you like?" There had always been one thing which lingered in his heart. He bowed in reply, "I would like to see mother once." Tianjun's expression became waxen as he coldly replied, "Mothers only spoil their children. You have to inherit the throne in the future. Your mother won't know how to discipline you. She'd only turn you into an indecisive fool. Not letting you see her is because I want what's best for you." He raised his head and looked straight into Tianjun's face, then lowered his head again and replied, "I only want to see mother once." Tianjun angrily said, "If you want me to agree, then you have to ascend to divinity at age 20,000. He was obviously being difficult. There had been no one in the entire world who could become a high deity by age 20,000. Even the revered Master Moiwan couldn't ascend divinity until age 25,000. 10,000 years passed by after Moiwan's feat before Zhangpi ascended at age 30,000. He had several years to go before reaching 20,000 years. His father counseled him, "Your mother is healthy right now, so you needn't worry. Tianjun favors you. All you have to do is obey him. Why make him unhappy?" His expression changed hearing these words. He didn't understand why his father was so weak. He wanted to see his mother once, not because she was especially loving to him. It was such a long time ago he didn't remember anything, including her face. He was only 9 years old at that time. Rather, he thought he wasn't a motherless child. He should at least know how she looks like. His father stopped asking Sujin to stay next to him. Throughout 20,000 years he had always treated this Princess Zaoran like the brush stand on his desk. She never had a real existence to him. Whether she continued standing by his desk or not didn't have a difference as far as he is concerned. He thought it was uncomfortable for Sujin to have to be with him each day too. She could finally free herself. As his birthday neared, Tianjun had forgotten about their bet. The day before his birthday, Sujin searched all over Zhuangdian but couldn't find him anywhere. Then thunder and lightning appeared throughout the entire 36 levels of heaven. Lightning flashed across the sky, cut into the clouds, and thunder struck directly on Donghuang. They destroyed everything along their path, burning trees and grass into ashes with each strike. Every immortal knew this thunderstorm wasn't a normal one. It was an ascension trial. Tianjun's face momentarily blanched white within Lengxiao Palace. Once these bolts were released, no one could avoid them. To withstand them meant living with heaven and earth, failing to meant a certain death. Tianjun stood waiting by the southern gate with his subjects, their faces pale. After 2 teacup time went by, he rode on a ragged cloud and unsteadily flew back, his entire body covered in blood. When he saw Tianjun standing by the southern gate, he summoned his last strength and hopped down from the cloud. He staggered and knelt down in front of Tianjun. His tone was cold as he spoke these respectful words. "Your Majesty had agreed with me that if I ascended to divinity at 20,000 years, you'd allow me to see my mother once. I've accomplished the task today, so when will I get to see my mother?" Tianjun watched him with a complicated expression and finally agreed, "Go back and rest first, lest you worry your mother." To ascend at age 20,000 was a feat never before seen. His legacy spread like a wave across the entire realm. From then on no one compared him to Moiwan anymore. Everyone marveled at his quick ascension to divinity. But not many thought about his consequential injuries. The injuries caused by the 3 thunder strikes were naturally not normal. From then on, he could only lie in rest inside his estate. Whenever he wanted to go somewhere, he'd need others' help. Although they stayed together for 20,000 years, he never kept Princess Zaoran, who stayed by his sick bed, who brought him medicine, who helped him move around, who helped him eat and drink, in his heart. He only assumed everything was ordered by Tianjun and gave it no further thought. Her care lasted for several years. Then one day, he overheard 2 maids chatting. They said Princess Zaoran is infatuated with him. When he was injured, the poor princess cried continually. He was made to study for over 20,000 years without any free time to think about romance. Then suddenly he was told he had an admirer, and she was furthermore Princess Zaoran. It surprised him, but he was sure such an absurd thing would never happen. Princess Zaoran's title was granted by Tianjun. She was Tianjun's younger sister in name. Even his father had to call her auntie, and he should call her great aunt. The great aunt has feelings for the great nephew? Although they weren't blood related, he knew such thing was impossible. He had always been a cold person. Even till now he never voluntarily went and looked for trouble. By keeping her feelings secretive, Sujin was only making it more convenient for him to pretend obliviousness. However, he started to decline Sujin's care every time she came to serve him. Then one day, after several rejections, Sujin asked him with a pale expression, "Do you already know?" He really didn't want to talk about this with her. Although he wasn't too knowledgeable about this thing called romance, he knew there were certain things that were better buried than shown. He quietly shook his head and turned to get some tea. Sujin grabbed onto his sleeve and trembly said, "I know you know." "If you already know, then why are you like this?" He icily replied, "What exactly do I already know?" Sujin's snow-white face briefly flushed. Her hands trembled more violently and at length she softly replied, I really like you." Sujin's confession was naturally unreturned. What he said then had hurt Sujin greatly. He said, "I've always treated you as a great aunt. My feelings for you are the same respect I hold for my grandparents." The corner of her eyes reddened as she replied, "You think I'm too old for you? But your fiancé Bai Qian of King Kaiu is 90,000 years older than you." He had been disciplined by Tianjun since he was young. But except for Tianjun, his two teachers, and his father, nobody had used such disrespectful words to talk to him. He was somewhat angered, but only said, "If you have the ability, then do what she does so that I can't say no to matrimony with you." Many years later he could still remember each word he said to Sujin that year. He has had to pay deeply for these careless words. Another 20,000 years went by. He was then 50,000 years old. Tianjun sent him down to earth to vanquish the red flame golden lion beast. 10 years prior the genie beast escaped from the southern land to the kingdom of Zhongrong. The bellicose beast slaughtered wherever he went, making the citizens of Zhongrong flee from their homeland. At the beginning of the 10th year, the genie beast lusted after the queen and kidnapped her back to his cave. The kind king hanged himself in outrage. When his soul reached the underworld, he listed the atrocities caused by the genie beast to seek justice. Although the red flame lion isn't as famed as the 4 ancient beasts, its power was no less than them. Yehua was sent on his own because Tianjun wanted this to be another training opportunity. They fought for 7 days in the kingdom of Zhongrong. Although the beast died under his sword, he had also depleted his energy and was forced to turn back into his original form. He was in truth a majestic black dragon. But he didn't want to look showy, so he shrank himself into the size of a snake. He stayed inside an obscure cave on Mount Junji. There was a peach forest on this mountain, and it was blossom season. As soon as he crawled into the cave, his eyes gave in and he fell asleep just moments later. This sleep went on serenely. When he finally woke up, he found himself in a small house of a mortal. This dilapidated straw hut was a push away from falling down. The wind blew outside. There were sounds of crackling leaves under footsteps. The wooden door creaked open and in came a small pair of slippers. Next a simple white robe appeared, and finally a woman's face. Years of deliberate meditation threatened to disappear. He was suddenly alarmed. The feminine figure in front of him was the same one which once appeared in his past memories. She brought to him a wave of familiarity, like he had finally found something he had lost after thousands of years. His uncle Liensong would undoubtedly fan his fan and say this is love, while the reverent Buddhas would undoubtedly clap their hands and pray this is an illusion. There is a cause for every event. He still hadn't forgotten 70,000 years ago when Moiwan sacrificed himself to the Donghuang bell. He was wakened by a thick hoarse voice. The painful voice kept calling out, "Teacher, wake up! Please wake up!" It kept idling by his ears, refusing to go away. Although it wasn't calling him, he was wakened by it anyway. The owner of that voice was the woman standing before him now. He lied still on bed. As if stabbed by something, dark waves slowly appeared within his usually placid eyes. She asked him cheerfully, "Are you awake now?" and caressed his horn. "I've seen many different snakes before, but none is as beautiful as you are. You're not like any other snake. There's even a horn on your head. How smooth it is, haha, how nice it is." He furrowed his brow and silently looked at her. Although he wasn't in his majestic black dragon form, this woman was indeed ignorant. She mistook him for an ordinary snake, wanted to keep him as a pet. There were benefits that came with being a house pet. For example, she frequently held him in her arms, talked to him, and fed him with her soft hands. She even shared with him half of her bed at night and covered him with a thick blanket. He guessed that she had never kept a snake before, because snakes don't really need a bed or a blanket when they sleep, and neither do dragons. For many nights he waited for her to fall asleep and turned back into his human form. He'd pull her into his embrace and only turn back into a dwarf dragon in the morning before she woke. She wasn't fond of flowery garments. She only wore white clothing, which was plain compared to the silk and satin of the fairies on heaven. But to him, her outfits were the most beautiful. He gave her a name and called her Susu. Su means pretty. September came in the blink of an eye. Cinnamon blossom's sweet fragrance drowned the region. Susu brought back a mother magpie who has lost her children. She started to dote on the magpie and paid less attention to him. He felt the danger of losing her affection. He waited for her to leave one day and went back to heaven to seek his uncle's advice. His amorous uncle told him, "I've never been with a mortal woman. But there is a saying, children like stars, women like smiles. Her knees are guaranteed to go weak if you flash a smile at her." The playboy then continued, "Beauties have always liked heroes. You could also create a demon and release him to scare her. Once she faints from fright, slash the demon with your Qing Ming sword. That way you'll become her savior. Without anything else to repay you, she'll have to use herself to clear this debt." Yehua turned the teacup in his hand and nonchalantly said, "I'm free tomorrow. Let me help you conjure up a demon to scare Shenjiu." "Yep, ordinary demons probably can't scare her. We have to find a petrifying one for her." Then you can jump in to save her on the brink of death. Without anything to repay you, she'll surely use her own body to clear this debt." The playboy grudgingly laughed, then sighed in reluctance. "You don't like the beauty tactic. You're afraid of scaring her with the hero tactic. Then why don't you use the misery tactic? Slash yourself and come sprawl out in front of her house. She'll naturally save a dying person. Then you can attach yourself to her even after your wound heal with the pretext of repaying her." "What is she going to do?" The teacup pounded down on the table. "What a great idea!" When he came back to the mortal realm, he formed a force field around Mount Junji to block it from heaven's intelligence. He draws up a spell and turns himself into a bloody man, exactly as he had looked when he was hit by the lightning bolts during his trial. This plan was indeed effective. Susu instantly dragged him inside and worriedly poured medicine over his injury. But since her hand was shaking so much, most of the medicine doesn't even reach his wound. When she turned around to get more medicine, he quickly made the gash close up on its own. After she turned back and saw that his wound was fast closing, she was jaw-slacked. How lovable her stunned face was to him. Susu kept him in her home because she was too worried to let him go, just as he had wanted. She didn't mention about his departure, so he kept his mouth shut as well, although his injury had long been healed. It went on this way until the 12th day. Early morning of the 12th day, Susu brought a bowl of porridge to him. She was a mild, tiny girl. Keeping a few small animals was fine, but feeding a grown adult like him was a bit difficult for her. She kept mumbling for words, feeling awkward that she should chase her guest away. He drank the porridge and casually said, "Since you saved me, it's only right that I stay and repay you." She quickly waved her hands to tell him it wasn't needed. He leisurely drank the rest of his porridge. Then he glanced at her fluttered face and smiled, "I don't want to be an ungrateful person. It doesn't matter whether you accept or not, I'll definitely repay you." Her face turned white then blue. He watches her troubled face and felt it was utterly lovely. He couldn't have ever guessed that the next line she said would be 100 times lovelier than her expression. What she said was, "If you want to repay me, then why don't you repay me with yourself?" They said their vows to heaven and earth that day in Donghuang. But fate is a horrible word. A mortal's fate is decided by the immortals. An immortal's fate is decided by heaven. One can't see it when it comes and one can't stop it when it leaves. Because of his uncle Zhangpi, his fate was to marry Lady Bai Qian of King Kaiyu. He had never given it much thought. It was all the same whether he married Bai Qian, White Qian, from King Kaiyu, Blue Qiu, or Qing Qian, Blue Qian, from Baiqiu, White Qiu. But there was now someone he loved. It hadn't been necessary before, but now he had to start a plan. Zhangpi's example was still hanging above his head. He couldn't run from the crown prince's throne even if he wanted to. He thought for days and finally chose the most dangerous route, which was nevertheless the most permanent one. Coincidentally, the Sea Dragon clan had some movements in the South Sea. It was a perfect excuse for him to leave heaven. Soon after Susu became pregnant. Although he was overwhelmed with happiness, his years of training made him much calmer than other fathers. After conceiving, Susu consumed much more food. His cooking skills improved greatly with this event. Within his predictions, the Sea Dragon clan finally uprose. Tianjun expectedly ordered him down to the South Sea to quench the uprising. He was afraid Susu would worry, thus he only told her he needed to go somewhere far to take care of an important matter. So she wouldn't be lonely, he gifted her a bronze mirror and promised to talk whenever he has time. To deceive Tianjun, he purposely took a slash from the Sea Dragon leader as he struck him with all his might. The soul-slicing saber of the Sea Dragon clan cut straight across his stomach. The deepness and length of the cut were as exact as they could be. An extra inch and he'd been destroyed, 1 inch less and it wouldn't be critical. Just like that, Liansong came back to heaven and fabricated his death to Tianjun, saying he had perished in Nanhai. It was a perfect ending. But beyond his planning, he never considered the most important thing: if Susu were to break out of his force field on Mount Junji. His plan crumbled and he was brought back to heaven. Rain suddenly downpoured on the drought-ridden Nangxia that day. He had never known regret since the day he was born. Now as he lied unconsciously in bed, he deeply regretted he didn't make the force field on Mount Junji a little thicker. He suddenly realized his injury was what caused the barrier to thin out, letting Susu escape. What he didn't realize is that no matter how thick that barrier was, his wife would still escape like she did. Tianjun visited him at Saho Palace. He asked after his injuries, then unhurriedly said, "By chance, I saw a human in the mortal realm who is carrying your chld. What is this about?" He stayed still in his bed and casually said, "I sustained some injuries when I defeated the Xianjini beast. She saved my life, so that baby is my repayment to her." Tianjun nodded his head and said, "It's negligible if it was only a repayment. However, you'll be my heir. Steeping yourself in love isn't a good thing. As long as you remember this, I don't mind anything else. Bring her to heaven if she's already with child." Yehua glanced to a blooming lotus and continued to indifferently reply, "What propriety is there to bring a human to the heaven palace? She's fine in the mortal realm, why bring her here?" His cold expression naturally pleased Tianjun. Tianjun happily smiled and said, "A heavenly child should be born in heaven. It's even less proper to leave him on earth. Bring her up here once your injury gets better." He knew then they could never be. From now on they would have to be strangers in that large heaven palace. He couldn't pull her into this dirty puddle, nor could he let her be infinitesimally hurt. He even thought himself lucky. Lucky because she hadn't loved him yet. In their relationship, fortunately the passion was all on his side. With the happy memories of Mount Junji, he didn't have any regret even if she forgets about him completely. 3 years, she only had to be safe for 3 years. After she gave birth to the baby, there wouldn't be any more reason for Tianjun to keep her in heaven. Yehua could then let her reincarnate back to Mount Junji and she would return to her happy days. He himself would be more than satisfied with looking at her through the water glass in heaven. He brought Susu to heaven and arranged for her to stay at Yulan Fanghua. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed by. In these 2 years everyone saw he has no affections toward this mortal. Tianjun observed the same. But there were times when they were alone together, when he couldn't check his own tender feelings for her. Fortunately only the two of them knew of his blunders. No one came to give her trouble in these 2 years. Although she stayed at the Heaven Palace, luckily none of Zhu Kongtian's impurity stained on her. In the spring of the third year, he was ordered to vanquish an unrest in the Northland. He didn't know it was a scheme designed by Tianjun to lure him away. Just the day after he left, the new concubine of Tianjun, Princess Zaoran, had acted out a play in his study. She faced his brush stand and spoke as if she was speaking to him. You married a mortal merely because you wanted to punish my unfaithfulness for marrying Tianjun. You didn't have a solution and neither did I. It was impossible to refuse Tianjun's favor, being a woman in this world. Yehua, tell me, you still love me, am I not right? You call her Susu all because there is a Su in my name. He of course didn't have an idea which Jin is the Jin in her name, or which Su is the Su in her name. He could memorize every official's name from the numerous reports he had to read, but as for her name, he didn't even have the time to find out how the characters are written. He could scoff off these nonsensical words or call her out on her craziness had he been the one to hear them. But the person who heard these words wasn't him. It was Susu. Of course he also didn't know Susu also heard loads of other nonsense designed for only her. Half a year later he returned to heaven. He still hadn't stepped into Saho Palace when Susu's maid came running toward him. She sobbed as she told him Susu and Lady Sujin were fighting on Zuxiantai. He hastily made way over to the terrace. But when he got there, he didn't see that Sujin was trying to harm Susu. Instead, he saw Susu herself pushing Sujin down. His mind started to race, if anything were to happen to Princess Zaoran. When he brought Sujin back, her eyes had been harmed by the tear energy. He suddenly remembered Zhangpi's incident from 50,000 years ago. Susu neared him and said, "It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't push her, Yehua, you have to believe me. You have to." She ceaselessly tried to explain. Her miserable appearance caused him aching pain. But she was protected so well the past 2 years that she didn't know what precarious situation she was in now. No matter what she did, people wouldn't change their minds. Sujin covered her eyes and moaned. The maids from afar were starting to make their way over. Whether Susu had pushed Sujin off Zuxiantai or not wasn't important anymore. The play Tianjun had staged is coming to an end. He sat waiting to see how his grandson will handle it now. The room drowned in silence, only Sujin's suppressed cries softly hammered on everyone's ears. His tightly clenched hands turned white. He was forced to agree, "Your Majesty is right. I couldn't see too clearly. I was only told by Lady Sujin that Susu didn't do it on purpose. Although it wasn't intentional, Lady Sujin is still gravely injured. Of course Susu will have to repay these 2 eyes. She's a mortal and yet she dared made a heavenly lady fall down Zuxiantai. It's unforgivable. She has to be struck by lightning for 3 years. Lady, gentlemen, are you satisfied with this?" Tianjun couldn't believe he could utter such reasonable words which put him at a disadvantage. His face blanched white as he unwillingly nodded to consent. He stepped forward and continued to say respectfully, "Susu was my savior. Your Majesty had taught me to repay my debts. I was the one who brought her to heaven. Naturally, I'm also responsible for the trouble she has caused. She is carrying my child right now. I ask that I can take the lightning punishment in her place." Everything he said was reasonable. Tianjun didn't give anything away on his face. He lifted his tea and took a sip. Then with an agreeable expression, he continued to consent. His own eyes saw Susu push Sujin down Zuxiantai. Giving back a pair of eyes is to please Tianjun, to please Sujin, to please the other immortals, but most importantly to repay Sujin. If it's not repaid today, Tianjun might plan a more horrible fate for Susu in her next lifetime to clear this debt. He was afraid she wouldn't be able to keep her life if that were to happen. After Susu unfairly lost her eyes, he went to Shenxiao Mansion on the 33rd level of heaven to receive his lightning bolt punishment. Every day he was struck with 49 bolts. The day Susu gave birth to their child was no exception. The marks weaved heavily on his body. Afraid Susu would find out, he didn't dare stay the nights with her at Yulan Fanghua. To bring Susu back to Mount Junji was now a far-gone dream. There was no way to erase her pain. He decided to keep her close to him for the rest of their lives. He didn't know that was also a futile wish. There was nothing he could do at that point to achieve happiness with her, the one person he loved. He was only her love trial. If it wasn't him, it'd be somebody else. He knew nothing of the cruelty of fate. When Susu threw herself down Zuxiantai, he also jumped after her. Normally, Zuxiantai shouldn't cause him to die, but since he had also received the thunder punishment, it was like seeking death. Tianjun thought he would only feel sad over Susu's death for a few days. He couldn't have imagined his grandson had loved that woman this much. When he hastened from Lengxiao Palace to Zuxiantai to save him, he was already on the brink of death. In just seconds the majestic Tianjun aged decidedly older. His long slumber went on for 60 immortal years. He himself didn't know why he had woken up. His mother couldn't bear to see him in pain and so went to the royal physician asking for an erase love pill. He looked at it coldly. Although this love of his cut into him constantly, Susu was still the only color in his 50,000 years of existence. If he loses even this one trace of color, he wouldn't be who is was anymore. Thus, despite the pain, he couldn't let her go. His stubbornness toward Susu was like Sujin's stubbornness toward him. But Sujin's stubbornness caused Susu's death and he honestly wanted to kill her in return. When the Qingming sword flew straight at her chest, Sujin in her red bridal dress faintly asked in disbelief, "Why?" He didn't care to answer. He drew back his sword, coldly glared at her, turned back into the palace, and tightly locked the main gate to Saogong. But Sujin was persistent. Although she was an orphan, she'd always got everything she wanted in all 70,000 years. Only he had made her fail time and time again. In front of everyone, she presented her family's treasure, the Piecing Soul Lantern, to Tianjun. 3 months later she successfully entered Saho Palace. In a blink of the eye 300 years quickly went by. Luckily fate isn't as cruel as imagined. His fate with the other person was finally coming to fruition. 300 years later he met a woman in Jian's peach orchard. The next day at Donghai Shuahun's water palace he saw her sit on a stone chair to lecture his second uncle's wife. Her right hand was holding a fan. The thumb and second finger of her left hand come together to form a circle, the other 3 fingers gently tap on the table. That was the exact motion Susu used to do unconsciously. That mouth of hers she was using to lecture others was also exactly like Susu's. Something clicked in his head. He instantly walked out from behind the coral. His mouth, which hadn't smiled in the past 300 years, now curled up in good humor, Miss, I can't believe it. So you're Lady Bai Qian from King Kaiu. The end of side story. I hope you're enjoyed. Thank you for listening.